guys. Welcome to the first episode of the Click Chick podcast. I'm McKenna. I own 1828 Collective, which is my wedding photography company. And I've been wanting to branch out into photo education for a long time. And now I'm finally taking the plunge and actually doing it after years of talking about doing it. So, this podcast is called the Click Chick Podcast as a part of 1828 Photo Education. And the purpose of the podcast is to provide photo education. I'm going to have some co hosts on here to talk about their experiences in the wedding industry and then also just general photography. So, not necessarily all wedding based. And then we're going to share a little bit of gossip too. If you enjoy the wedding industry, then you do like a little bit of drama as well. So, sharing a little bit of drama to keep it interesting for you guys. Because this is the first episode, I thought I would share my origin story, how I became a photographer, and what I wish I knew when I was starting photography. It took me a while to really start making money with photography. And if I had listened to the advice that I'm going to give, I would have blown up a lot quicker and been able to go full time. So I started 1828 Collective in 2016. But before that, I went to school for digital media advertising. So that was my degree. And at the time, I thought that I was going to be a graphic designer, do web design, branding design. I was all about the digital side of things, which is so funny in hindsight. And I do think it's played a lot into my eye now as a photographer. But yeah, I went for design, and as a part of that, I had to take a photography class. And at the time, I hated it. I hated that class so much. And if you're my teacher and you're watching, I'm still mad that you gave me an 89.9 on my final and bumped my GPA down. I will never forget you. All to say, I am thankful to have taken a photography class because it taught me generally how to use a camera. When I was doing it, I was like, oh man, I want to learn more about these design programs. I don't see the point in doing a photography class. And yeah, the assignments were crazy. The teacher was not a good photographer himself, and maybe I'm a little jaded because of that grade he gave me. But yeah, it wasn't fun for me, but as a part of that class, we learned how to use manual mode. Prior to the class, I was all about auto and had really no idea much about camera settings. And also, I ended up buying a camera because of that class because I got sick of renting a camera from the library. They had like strict rules about returning it and weird hours that you could have it. And I just didn't want to deal with that anymore. So I went ahead and bought my own camera. So because I owned a camera and knew how to use it, friends started asking me to take photos for them for their graduation photos or just photos of them in a flower field for their Instagram. And, as much fun as it is hanging out with your friends and taking photos, I wasn't excited about it. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, I want to be a photographer until I did my first couple session. And that was when it really clicked for me that this isn't just taking photos, it's capturing where people are in time and kind of creating a little bit of their legacy for them, getting to give them photos that they can show to their kids and their grandkids and just document where they are in life right now. So that's really where that spark came. And so from there, and actually my first wedding was a few years after I went to college, or took that first camera class. I might have still been in college when I did my first wedding. But my first wedding, I had no idea what I was getting into, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. I had no expectations of what a wedding day was supposed to look like. I just jumped right in. It was for a friend of a friend. And they didn't know that I had never shot a wedding before. It wasn't something that I was just like outright about. I didn't lie to them. I wasn't like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. But when I met with her, I asked her a bunch of questions about what the wedding day was going to look like and just showed up to her wedding day, shot it. Everything thankfully turned out great. And it was a huge turning point for me. I thought it was so incredible to be able to photograph somebody's wedding day and get to tell their story in that way. Definitely would not recommend just jumping straight into weddings. That's, in hindsight, that's insane. But I'll just say that was my first wedding. One of my first weddings too, like early days clients. I did it for free because again, it was like a friend of a friend. And they ended up tipping me in Fleming's Steakhouse gift cards, which I was actually stoked on. Like, who doesn't want some steak? Um, Especially when I thought I was doing it for free. But if you've seen The Office, I felt like Meredith from The Office, where she's doing some inappropriate favors for a guy in exchange for steak coupons. Or Outback Steakhouse, that's what it is, Outback Steakhouse coupons. If you watch The Office, you probably know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that was some of my first weddings, and I had never second shot before. I had no idea what to expect. And again, thankfully, I knew enough about camera settings to where it was fine and everything worked out. But I wouldn't recommend that to anybody who's starting out in photography now. And then as far as like my photography style and who I was as a photographer when I was starting out, was I really didn't know much about different types of photography in the wedding industry. So now it's all trending with documentary style, and that's such a buzzword for everybody to use. But when I was starting out in 2016, 2017, everybody was kind of just doing the basic wedding photos. And I don't mean to like call it basic in a rude way, but what I'm saying is just capturing key moments. So getting the moments where the bride and groom kiss, the family formals, the wedding party, the kind of Pinterest post type of a photo, which, there's a time and place and it's fantastic. But I definitely was one of those typical wedding photographers, just getting all of the expected shots and then going home. And it wasn't until I got to work with Nirav Patel, who, if you don't know who that is, he's a really just incredibly talented, incredible person, but phenomenal photographer out of San Francisco. And I got to work with him in Virginia. And working with him just really changed my entire viewpoint on photography, because that was the first time that I worked with somebody who I would call documentary style. Absolutely. And it's the first time that I realized what the difference was between taking photos that are expected versus taking photos that are emotional. So getting to work with him was just really interesting to me because, of course, he would take those expected moments, the bride putting her dress on, but then he would stay in the room and he would get the photos of the mom and her having an emotional moment together. And he would keep his head on a swivel and see who else is in the room, who else is crying, little details, little moments. So just everything that comes together to tell the story of a wedding day, instead of just being like, okay, literally, here's our wedding and here's what happened. And he would tell a story of the emotions of the day and just that reality and that rawness was so intriguing to me and something that I had never seen before. And even just how he worked with the clients in a way that was really encouraging and giving them direction, but not too much direction, just kind of letting them be themselves and not being like, okay, here's the 10 poses that I use with every couple, and just letting them be authentically themselves to completely change my business and how I worked with clients. So ever since then, I'm trying to remember when that was, if it was 2019. I want to say it was 2019. So ever since then is when I would call myself a documentary style photographer. And that was just what I was so excited about, what I wanted to do. And then that's when I started taking photography more seriously. I started booking clients. I think I had 15 booked for 2020. And then of course, COVID happened. And, there were a few like setbacks because of that, but I am very fortunate that I'm not one of the photographers whose business tanked during that. I actually, again, fortunately, I don't want to be braggy because I know a lot of people suffered, but I blew up during 2020 and I really became full-time at that point. I booked 42 weddings for the next year and just fully dove into it, went full-time, quit my job, and really just haven't looked back since. So that's my background as far as wedding photography. And then we're going to jump into what I wish I knew when I started photography so that it didn't take me, oh gosh, how long was that? So 2016 is when I started my business. So it took me almost 4 years to actually start making money and take it seriously as a business. The first thing that I wish I knew when I started wedding photography is you need to second shoot before you do your first wedding. And I say you need to, but then I told you that I didn't. So no, I guess technically you don't need to second shoot before your first wedding, but I highly, highly, highly advise that you second shoot because it's so important to know what the flow of the wedding day is going to look like, what to expect from clients, what to do if the timeline runs behind, and just generally what the flow of the day looks like, how to work with other vendors, the videographer. There's so many little things that happen during wedding day where if you don't know what it's supposed to look like, you probably are going to struggle. I was very fortunate that it all worked out for me, but that isn't the case for everybody. As far as second shooting too, I know it's hard to initially jump right in. And when I was starting out, I reached out to a few local photographers and was like, I will second shoot for you for free. And I'm trying to build my portfolio, everything like that. And I'm going to make an episode on how to be a good second photographer because I do think that's something that's important to talk about. I won't go too deep on that, but as far as getting gigs, please don't reach out to photographers and tell them that you're going to second shoot for them for free. That doesn't really look like you know what you're doing. And then also it comes across like you're shooting for your own portfolio and not to work for the photographer. And I'll get into all of that deeper in another episode. As far as getting second photographer gigs, I would recommend joining Facebook groups for wedding photographers in your area. So I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a part of a ton of those Facebook groups. I post opportunities on there. I don't mind working with photographers who have never shot a wedding before. It just kind of depends on their confidence and how they pitch themselves and what work they can show me. So make sure you do have a good portfolio as far as just working with clients. I don't need to see that you've done weddings before, but just being able to show that you know how to pose people, that you understand camera settings, you understand how to use a flash, all of that is important. And then in these Facebook groups, photographers post hey, I'm looking for a second photographer to do this wedding on this date. And you can comment on there. Be honest about your level of experience. Don't lie to people just to get a job. But there will be people eventually who work for you, and then you can build up your second shooter portfolio, and that'll help you jump into the industry. It also helps too if you have a photographer friend who will let you tag along on a wedding day or just walk you through all of that. But again, don't expect somebody to just do that for free. That's a lot of work. So definitely just kind of figuring out what works for you. But Facebook groups are a really good place to start with finding second shooter opportunities. The next thing I wish I knew when I was starting wedding photography is to only post on social media the things that you want to book. So like I said earlier, when I was telling my backstory, I thought I was going to get into graphic design, and then I was dabbling in photography, and I was very much just all over the place with what I was doing. So my Instagram reflected that. 1828 Collective didn't used to just do weddings. It also did graphic design and senior portraits and family portraits, and my website was all over the place and had a million tabs for the million different things that I did and I offered. So in hindsight, no wonder I wasn't booking weddings because I wasn't posting weddings, and I wasn't really booking anything consistently. It was all over the place because what I was advertising was all over the place. So because if you're listening to this, you're probably a new photographer. But if you are, you don't have a big portfolio right now. And what I would say to you is to just ask your friends to model for you. Ask your couple friends, hey, can you put on whatever, some cute clothes and pretend to do an engagement session with me or a couple session, or invest a little bit and get a wedding dress and do your own styled shoot so that you can have content. I remember I did that a little bit when I was starting out too. I would ask like a ton of friends to do photos for me. I bought a bouquet from the farmer's market, had her dress up kind of bridal, did some photos that way. Again, like don't lie to clients about your level of experience and make it seem like it was a real wedding, but just having content that visually says like, this is a wedding, that's going to help you book more stuff like that. And then also, if you are more developed in weddings and comfortable in trying to do full-time wedding photography and jump right in, there's a lot of groups who do styled shoots too that you can find. There's, again, I'm going to mention Facebook groups so many times today, but there are Facebook groups that advertise for that, and that's really helpful. To find styled shoots, usually you have to have a pretty good financial investment in that. I think most of the ones I've done are like $200 to $700. And then if you want to do something really high end, you're getting like $1,000, $2,000. It's a business write-off, if that's helpful. Don't take tax advice from me, but that is something you can do. But yeah, just posting things that go along with your style and what you're looking to book is really important so that you're niching down and figuring out who your client base is. That way your followers are people who want to book with you. All right, let's talk about networking and advertising. When I was starting out, I was almost shy, maybe you could say, to put my work out there. I was in college and kind of embarrassed, being like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And right now I'm not making any money and everybody's going to see what I'm putting out there. And it is vulnerable to put yourself out in that way. So I wish that I had networked more and put myself out there more. I had my business page for 1828 Collective, but I wasn't posting anything on my Instagram stories or my Facebook page for my personal social media because I didn't want my friends to see it. I didn't want to be embarrassed. So in hindsight, I wish I had put more stuff out there because it would have helped me make more photographer friends quicker. And now a lot of my bookings come from referrals from other photographers, other coordinators, videographers, whoever, because I've networked now so much that I have that clientele or just networking base. But at the time, I was just so shy and keep to myself that I wasn't doing that. So once again, mentioning Facebook groups, if you can find photographer groups where they share content, asking questions to try and improve their work, all of that's really important. I'm launching also self-promo. I'm launching a Facebook group right now for 1828 photo education where you can do exactly that. Post your work, ask questions, see where you can improve, and just be kind of a fun little community of photographers where we support each other. So I'll leave a link in the description of this episode. So if you guys want to join, you can link up there. But then as far as advertising too, I know not everybody has a budget for advertising. Part of what helped my business take off in 2019, 2020 is that I started advertising on Wedding Wire. I know, again, that's a little bit of a steep price and not for everybody. There's also sites like Zola, The Knot. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with anything except for Wedding Wire. I've also tried running like Instagram and Facebook ads, and that didn't get me anywhere. I think partly because I just didn't know what I was doing with it. I've had friends who have people who help them figure out how to do the ads, and that's been more successful for them. But again, I haven't touched on any of that. But if you know what you're doing and do a lot of research into advertising, you can help get yourself some work that way. But another way to advertise is, you guessed it, Facebook groups. There's Facebook groups out there for people who are looking for wedding vendors. So you can find in your area, so I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So you can look at brides of Charlotte, and they're going to post in there, hey guys, I'm looking for a photographer. We're on a budget. We can only spend $1,000 or whatever. So if that's what you're willing to work for, that's a good way of finding some of your first weddings and just telling them, hi, I've never shot a wedding before, but I can meet your whatever $600 budget. If you're willing to work with a new person. Again, pitch yourself maybe a little bit more confidently than that. That kind of sounded like meh, but it's a good way to get some of your first weddings and get that experience under your belt so that you can feel confident in charging these larger prices for weddings and booking higher end clients. All right, so wedding gear. This is probably a little bit more controversial as far as what everybody expects you to have as a newbie wedding photographer, and especially just for second shooting. If you're doing weddings, you need to have 2 camera bodies. So whether that means you rent a second camera body for every time you have a wedding and you just have one regularly for your engagement sessions and whatever, but things happen, and I've been doing this 7, almost 8 years. And I've had things happen to my camera to where I needed that backup camera. So if you're second shooting, I would recommend having a backup. I wouldn't say it's required, but as a wedding photographer, you do need to have 2 cameras. You are in charge of the day. Clients are depending on you to get those photos. So you need to be able to have a backup in case, you drop a camera or something happens. Mine usually has to do with the camera, computer technology, whatever, and have to troubleshoot on YouTube quick. So having that backup camera is essential so that you're not missing moments. And then as far as also before I jump into that, having dual slot full frame camera is important. And I'll go into gear again at some point, but just to kind of keep it brief for you guys, dual slot means that there's 2 SD cards writing information. So backing up your photos onto the camera. So having a backup means that if one SD card corrupts, you're not just SOL, and you have that second backup so that you're not losing those wedding images. And for lenses, I'm a basic girl, honestly. I'm not super high maintenance when it comes to lenses. On my own wedding days, I just shoot with a 35 and an 85. I do own other lenses, but primarily that's what I shoot with. Usually on a wedding day, I walk away with most of the images from the wedding day being on my 35. It's just my favorite lens. But yeah, if I was telling somebody what to buy as a new photographer, I would say a 35 and an 85 if you wanted to get into weddings. And if you're just doing like engagement sessions, all you really need is a camera body and a 35 millimeter. And you can do so much with that without having to spend a ton of money. And then if you're getting into weddings too, obviously you need a flash. So having I can never remember exactly how the term, I know what off-camera flash is where you have like the stand set up, but there's like on-camera flash. I think that's what I'm talking about. But when I say on-camera flash, I always think about like those cheaper cameras where it has the pop-up flash. And to me, that's what on-camera flash means. But I'll just say you need a flash for your camera. And my biggest regret when I was starting wedding photography is that I used the flashes that took AA batteries, meaning that I had to buy AA batteries constantly for those flashes. And when I did my taxes for the year, I realized that I spent something like $1,200 on AA batteries. So had I just bought the rechargeable flash, I would have saved so much money, like a sickening amount of money. So if you want to get into weddings, I so recommend that you get a rechargeable flash just right off the bat and save yourself the heartache that I felt when I did my taxes. And then the last thing that I wish I knew when I was starting in wedding photography, or just photography in general, booking clients, is like I mentioned when I was telling my backstory, getting those in between moments. And, there is a time and place for stepping in and directing and telling clients what to do, but continuing to shoot when that direction has fallen away is so important. I want to capture those sweet moments where you're just interacting with your partner, with your family, whatever it might be, and just truly getting candid images in between getting those posed shots. So just taking kind of a breather and a step back and remembering that those little moments are just as important as the key moments. So of course, get the bride and groom coming down the aisle, doing their first kiss, all excited, all happy. But as they're coming back down the aisle and finishing the ceremony, follow them as their friends and family are coming over to be excited and celebrating with them. And, she's showing grandma her new ring set and just all of the giggling and tears. I'm going kind of rambling now, but those little moments are just so sweet. And that's what I've found clients end up posting on Facebook and Instagram and just kind of reflecting on the day. We love a little nostalgia moment. So getting those real life moments helps kind of flush out the gallery and give your clients that experience where they really feel like they're back in the wedding day. All right. So that is all for today for the first episode of the Click Chick podcast. I appreciate you guys listening. I'm so excited for the episodes to come. If you want to follow along, you can follow my personal work at 1828 Collective on Instagram. You can follow the photo education at 1828 Photo Education. And then you can also follow me on TikTok at 1828 Collective. And like I mentioned before, you can join our Facebook group, which will be linked below. But it's 1828 Photo Education. I can't wait to see you guys for the next episode. And again, thank you for listening.